The janitor's name was Samuel Harris. He was 52, with silver streaks in his black hair and kind, quiet eyes that seemed to notice everything. Samuel was a humble man. He never complained, never demanded attention, and never bragged about anything. He did his work with care and pride, sweeping floors, emptying trash cans, and cleaning windows in the big glassy office building downtown. Every morning, Samuel arrived before sunrise. He wore his plain uniform, carrying his mop and bucket, moving silently through the empty halls. He was invisible to most people in the building, especially the executives. To them, he was just another janitor, a background figure they never thought about. But Samuel saw everything. Every door he opened, every paper he passed by, every whisper in the hall, he noticed it all. The executives in the building, on the other hand, lived in a world of power, money, and ego. The boardroom on the top floor was where the important decisions were made. Here, men and women in crisp suits talked loudly about numbers, profits, and strategies. Some of them laughed at small mistakes, some dismissed ideas before hearing them. They believed they were the smartest people in the room and nothing could surprise them. On this particular morning, the boardroom was buzzing with activity. A huge meeting was about to start. The company's future was at stake. Executives moved quickly, placing papers, checking phones, and exchanging sharp words. There was tension in the air, but also an arrogant confidence. None of them imagined that a quiet figure from the janitor's closet of duties would change everything. Samuel went about his usual routine. He cleaned the floors outside the boardroom, wiping away smudges and dust. He passed by the polished glass doors, peeking inside as the meeting began. He could hear the voices, the laughter, the occasional argument. And he smiled silently to himself. He knew things about this company that no one in the boardroom realized. Little details, mistakes hidden in reports, opportunities wasted, all visible to Samuel. As the meeting continued, Samuel finished the hallway and looked at the boardroom. He had a simple reason to enter today. The trash bins inside needed emptying. But today, as he pushed the door slightly, the meeting was in full swing. The executives glanced at him and laughed immediately. "Here comes the janitor," one of them whispered, smirking. "Maybe he has a business idea for us too." The laughter spread across the room. Samuel didn't reply. He didn't even flinch. He stepped in quietly, his mop bucket rolling softly behind him. He moved carefully, placing the bins where they belonged, and began to clean a small spill near the corner. The arrogance of the executives filled the room, but Samuel remained calm. He noticed the mistakes on the reports, the missed details in the spreadsheets, and the wrong assumptions the executives had made. He smiled faintly. They laughed at him, unaware that he knew more about the company than most of them did. They did not know that Samuel had once worked in the business world himself. Years ago he had been an analyst, a thinker, a strategist. Life had changed and he had taken the janitor job quietly, blending into the background. But his mind had not changed. He remembered numbers, trends, and secrets that could make or break a company. As the executives argued over trivial points, Samuel moved silently. He could hear everything, observe everything, and remember every small error. One executive dropped a coffee cup, and the others laughed at the clumsy mistake, completely unaware that Samuel had predicted this chaos from the moment he saw them start the meeting. A young executive glanced at Samuel and whispered to a colleague, "Why does he even come in here? Doesn't he have floors to mop?" The colleague laughed, shaking his head. "He probably thinks he's part of the meeting. Poor guy." Samuel did not respond. He continued his work calmly, moving to the corner, wiping a table, and straightening papers that had fallen. But behind the humility of his actions, there was a mind working, calculating, observing, and planning. Every laugh, every sneer, every careless word of the executives was being noted. They had no idea that this quiet man in the janitor uniform was silently collecting the pieces of a puzzle they couldn't even see. As the meeting reached its peak, the tension in the room grew. Executives argued about profits, blame, and decisions. Samuel finished cleaning the spill and paused for a moment. He looked at the faces of the powerful men and women, smiling faintly. To them he was invisible, a joke, a figure of ridicule. But Samuel knew the truth. He had information that could change everything in this company. And in that moment, a thought crossed his mind. They laugh at me now, but one day they will listen. The room continued buzzing with arrogance and laughter. Samuel quietly collected his mop and bucket. As he stepped back toward the door, a subtle spark of mystery hung in the air. Little did the executives know, this humble janitor held secrets and knowledge that could shake their world. He had the power to turn the entire company upside down, and they had no idea it was coming. The janitor left the boardroom silently, pushing the door closed behind him. And yet the room seemed different now. A tiny, invisible tension lingered, as if the air itself knew something was about to happen. Something unexpected. Something that would shock everyone. Little did they know, this man knew secrets that could change everything. And that was only the beginning. Samuel Harris returned to his daily routine the next morning, walking the silent halls of the office building. Even before sunrise, he moved with quiet purpose, pushing his mop and bucket. The hum of the elevators and the distant chatter of early employees filled the air. To most, he was just a janitor again. A humble, invisible figure. But Samuel's eyes noticed everything. Every detail mattered to him. Every mistake, every flaw in the system, every opportunity wasted. That morning he stopped outside the boardroom again. The glass doors reflected his tired but steady face. Inside he could see executives setting up for another meeting. Papers were scattered, charts displayed incorrectly, and someone had placed a critical financial report upside down. Samuel sighed quietly. Most people would never notice these things, but he did. He had a way of seeing patterns that others overlooked. Samuel began his work, sweeping the floor outside the boardroom. He adjusted a fallen chair, straightened a crooked nameplate, and carefully wiped a small coffee stain from the polished table near the door. It was a small gesture, invisible to most, but it gave him satisfaction. He liked order. He liked balance. And he liked knowing that one day, these little details could matter more than anyone could imagine. Inside the boardroom, executives started trickling in. They were still arrogant, still confident, and still completely unaware of Samuel's sharp mind. As the meeting began, they argued over numbers, schedules, and decisions. One executive misread a chart and laughed it off. Samuel paused, noting the mistake. He knew the correct numbers without even looking at the full report. His mind worked fast, silently analyzing trends and solutions. Samuel didn't intervene, yet. He stayed calm, his mop resting against the wall, listening to every word, observing every expression. He had learned long ago that the quietest person in the room often saw the most. And Samuel had seen a lot. A young intern brought in some papers and accidentally dropped them. Executives sighed, annoyed. Samuel quietly bent down and helped gather the documents, placing them neatly on the table. One executive muttered under his breath, "Even the janitor can pick up papers better than some of us handle our reports." Samuel smiled faintly to himself. He did not take offense. In fact, he enjoyed these small moments. They reminded him how underestimated he truly was. But more importantly, they reminded him of the secret he had been keeping. Weeks ago, Samuel had begun a private project. Every day, while cleaning and observing, he had collected data, memorized errors, and analyzed inefficiencies. He noticed trends that no executive had paid attention to. He had read reports, learned the numbers, and predicted problems before they happened. He had quietly built a map of the company's weaknesses and strengths, like a strategist planning a battle without anyone realizing. And now the pieces were ready. He just had to wait for the right moment. As the meeting continued, Samuel noticed a serious issue in the financial plan. If the executives continued with their current strategy, the company could lose millions. He scribbled notes on a small piece of paper just for himself so no one would see. The irony was not lost on him. They laughed at him yesterday, today they were making a mistake that he could prevent, but they would never know until the right time. During a coffee break, Samuel quietly moved around the room. He overheard an executive saying, "If this company fails, it will be on the board. But who even notices the little mistakes? I wish someone would catch them before it's too late." Samuel smiled inside. He was that someone. He always had been. The tension in the boardroom was growing. Executives argued more fiercely, blaming each other for minor errors. Samuel stayed in the background, cleaning, observing, remembering. He noticed small signs of panic in a few leaders, the cracks in their confidence. But he also noticed something else: opportunity. Opportunity to show what one human could do when no one believed in him. By the end of the day, Samuel had silently corrected a dozen errors, adjusted reports, and noted every critical problem. To the executives, he had simply done his janitor work. But in reality, he was preparing for a revelation that would shake their world. As he wheeled his mop bucket to the corner, he paused and looked at the boardroom one last time. The executives were still laughing and arguing, blind to the fact that their plans were flawed. Samuel's mind was sharp, his calculations precise, and his patience endless. He had waited for this moment for weeks, quietly building the foundation for a plan that no one would expect. And somewhere deep inside he felt a quiet thrill. Not of revenge, but of justice, of truth, of proving that the quiet, humble, overlooked person could see and understand things that the arrogant and powerful could not. He whispered to himself as he left the room. One day they will listen. One day they will realize, I have been watching all along. Little did the executives know, the janitor they laughed at had already solved problems they hadn't even noticed. The stage was set for the moment when the underdog would rise, not for fame or recognition, but to show what one human, underestimated and ignored, could truly accomplish. And that moment was coming sooner than anyone could imagine. The next morning the office was buzzing with energy. Executives arrived in their sleek cars, suits perfectly pressed, phones in hand. They were confident, arrogant, and completely absorbed in their world of profits and power. Samuel Harris arrived early as always, quietly pushing his mop and bucket through the silent halls. To anyone watching he seemed ordinary. But Samuel's eyes were sharp, observant, calculating. Today he knew the boardroom would become a battlefield of arrogance versus truth. As he approached the boardroom door, he noticed the executives gathering inside, laughing and chatting loudly. One of them, a tall man named Mr. Carlyle, was especially smug that morning. He leaned back in his chair and chuckled. Did you hear? The janitor, Samuel, tried to correct a report yesterday. Can you believe it? Another executive, Miss Trenton, laughed, rolling her eyes. Huh? The janitor giving advice? Maybe he thinks he's smarter than us. Pathetic. The room erupted in laughter. They didn't even see Samuel standing just outside the door, quietly listening, his hands on his mop handle. They thought he couldn't hear them. They thought he didn't understand. Samuel stepped inside, carrying his cleaning tools. The laughter grew louder. One executive mockingly called out, Hey Samuel, can you mop up our mistakes too? The others chuckled. Maybe he can teach us how to be humble. Samuel did not respond. He remained calm, polite, and quiet. He placed his mop and bucket in the corner and started tidying a small spill near the window. He moved deliberately, slowly, letting their arrogance fill the room like a thick fog. But inside, Samuel's mind was racing. He had been underestimated all his life. People had laughed at him because of his humble job, because he didn't fight for recognition, because he remained quiet. But Samuel had learned something powerful. Those who underestimate others are blind to what truly matters. As the meeting began, the executives continued to argue over reports, numbers, and deadlines. One of them, a young man named Derek, dropped a pen and muttered, Even the janitor could run this better than some of us. The laughter was louder this time. They mocked him openly. They whispered, snickered, and shook their heads. To them, Samuel was invisible. But Samuel noticed everything: the misplaced charts, the incorrect calculations, the tiny errors that no one else saw. He also noticed the human side of them, their arrogance, their fear of being wrong, their overconfidence. He remembered every detail, every word. These executives had no idea that Samuel's quiet observations were building a hidden map of their weaknesses. During a pause in the meeting, one executive tossed a coffee cup toward the trash, but it missed and spilled. The room erupted in laughter again. Classic Samuel, someone joked. Always cleaning after everyone. Samuel smiled faintly, but inside he felt a quiet fire. The laughter, the mockery, the ignorance, it was all fuel for what was coming. He did not hate them, but he knew one thing. People often fail to see the power in humility. They did not see that Samuel's mind had been quietly working for months, analyzing, learning, understanding. He could solve problems they hadn't noticed, predict mistakes they hadn't even imagined, and reveal truths they were blind to. But he would not do it yet. Patience was part of the plan. Samuel had learned that timing mattered more than speed. As the executives argued about minor details, Samuel quietly moved to a corner, adjusting a paper here, wiping a small stain there. No one noticed him. But they would notice soon. One executive, frustrated, slammed a report on the table. We are wasting time. None of these solutions make sense, he shouted. Why can't someone think clearly here? Samuel paused, listening. His mind connected the dots faster than anyone else could. He had already solved these problems in his head. All the answers, all the strategies, they were there, ready for the right moment. The meeting continued, tension building. The executives became more hostile toward each other, their voices rising. Samuel's calm presence contrasted sharply with their chaos. He was like a quiet river running through a storm, unnoticed but powerful. Finally, Mr. Carlyle turned to him, sneering, Samuel, do you have any insight to offer today? Or just more mopping? The room erupted in laughter. Samuel looked up slowly, his eyes calm and steady. He did not speak, but he did not need to yet. The executives had shown their arrogance, their underestimation of him. He had seen everything. And he knew they were ready for a surprise. He finished his cleaning, collected his mop, and stepped back. The tension in the room grew. Something unspoken hung in the air, something that even the executives could feel but could not yet name. Little did they know, the quiet janitor they mocked and ignored had already mapped the mistakes, discovered the inefficiencies, and was ready to reveal truths that would shock them all. The tables were about to turn, and the room would never be the same again. As Samuel left the room silently, he whispered to himself, "Patience. One day they will see. One day they will understand. And that day will change everything." And in that moment, a subtle change began. The laughter faded slightly, replaced by an invisible tension. The executives didn't notice it yet, but the quiet janitor had planted the first seed of doubt, a doubt that would grow into astonishment in the days to come. The morning sun streamed through the tall glass windows of the office building, catching dust particles that floated like tiny stars in the air. Samuel Harris pushed his mop and bucket down the quiet hallway, moving with the same calm, deliberate steps as always. To the casual observer, he was just a janitor doing his ordinary work. But today was different. Today, Samuel knew the first shift of change would occur. The boardroom doors were open, and the usual chaos awaited inside. Executives were reviewing reports, arguing over numbers, and discussing strategies as if their words alone could save the company. Samuel moved silently toward a small corner, placing his mop and bucket neatly against the wall. He began his routine of tidying minor spills and straightening papers, blending into the background. But Samuel was not merely cleaning today. He was observing, analyzing, and waiting for the precise moment to act. A particularly tense executive, Miss Trenton, furrowed her brow as she examined a profit report. "These numbers just don't make sense," she muttered. "If we continue with this plan, we'll lose millions next quarter." Samuel's ears perked up. He had noticed the discrepancy days ago. The mistake was subtle, buried in a pile of reports that no one else bothered to check. But he knew exactly where it was. His mind raced, connecting figures, trends, and patterns faster than any computer in the building. As the executives argued over what to do, Samuel quietly stepped closer, carrying a single sheet of paper. His hands were steady, his movements calm. He approached the table, and a few executives turned to him, surprised to see him standing there. "Samuel? What are you doing?" Mr. Carlyle asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. Samuel said nothing at first. He calmly placed the paper on the table and gestured toward it. "I think there's an error here," he said softly. The executives stared at him, mouths slightly open. Laughter bubbled up in the corner. "Oh, this should be good," Derek said. "The janitor is fixing our financials now?" But Samuel remained calm. He pointed to a small column in the report, showing the exact line where a miscalculation had been made. The room went quiet. One by one, executives leaned in, examining the numbers. "Wait a minute," Miss Trenton said, adjusting her glasses. This is correct. This number, it's different from what we calculated." Samuel nodded silently. "Yes. I double-checked the calculations. The projections are off by a significant amount if this isn't corrected." The executives exchanged shocked glances. Mr. Carlyle's face paled slightly. How did you?" Samuel didn't answer. He simply handed out a few more sheets showing corrected calculations, revised projections, and suggested changes. Every single point he made was accurate, precise, and undeniable. The room was still. The laughter from yesterday had vanished. A young executive whispered almost in awe, He's right. How does he know this?" Samuel's lips curved into a faint smile. He had waited for this moment patiently. The moment when the arrogant executives who had laughed at him and dismissed him would see the truth. Not in words, but in undeniable facts. Mr. Carlyle cleared his throat, trying to maintain authority. This can't be possible. How did a janitor?" Samuel finally spoke, his voice calm, firm, and precise. "I have been observing the reports for months. I noticed trends and mistakes no one else did. I wanted to make sure the company would not suffer because of simple errors." The room fell completely silent. Executives shifted in their chairs, suddenly aware of the quiet man they had ignored for so long. Their eyes were wide with disbelief, respect slowly creeping in. Miss Trenton, her voice softer now, said, "Samuel, this is incredible. How did you notice all this?" Samuel shrugged modestly. "I've always paid attention. It doesn't matter what your title is. Details matter more than ego." For the first time, the executives truly looked at Samuel. They no longer saw a janitor. They saw a human being with extraordinary insight, intelligence, and patience. A person who had quietly learned, calculated, and prepared for the moment when his observations could make a difference. A tense silence filled the room, thick and heavy. The executives who had mocked him yesterday were now realizing they had been blind. And Samuel, still calm and humble, had delivered the first signs of a revelation that would shake the very foundation of the company. As he turned to leave the boardroom, a small, knowing smile touched his lips. He had shown them just a glimpse of his ability. The true plan, the full power of his insight, was yet to come. Patience, he whispered to himself. They need to see a little first, before they understand the whole picture. The executives watched him go, some shaking their heads, some staring in disbelief. One could not help but whisper, "I can't believe it, the janitor, he's brilliant." And in that moment, Samuel Harris walked silently down the hallway, unnoticed by most, but carrying with him the knowledge that he had begun to change everything. The underestimation that had defined his life was fading, replaced by something far more powerful, respect earned not by title but by action. The turning point had begun, and the world of the executives would never be the same again. The boardroom was silent. The usual hum of chatter, the confident laughter, and the constant arguing had vanished. Samuel Harris stood near the corner, calm and composed, while the executives stared at him in disbelief. Their eyes, which had once dismissed him as a mere janitor, now searched for answers they could not understand. How do you know all of this?" Mr. Carlyle finally stammered, his voice shaky. His arrogance, which had once filled the room like a thick fog, was now replaced by confusion and awe. Samuel smiled faintly, humble yet firm. "I have been observing. I have been studying the reports, the trends, the mistakes. Every detail matters, and I never ignore what others consider unimportant." The executives exchanged glances, some whispering to each other. They could not believe that this quiet, invisible man had not only noticed errors but had understood the inner workings of the company better than they did. Miss Trenton, still trying to collect herself, asked, "But, you're just the janitor. How could you have done all this?" Samuel's smile did not waver. Titles do not make a person smart. Knowledge, observation, and patience do. I may clean the floors, but my mind has never stopped working. A few executives were silent, staring at him with a mix of shame and admiration. They realized how wrong they had been to laugh, to mock, and to dismiss him. Every insult, every sneer, every joke they had made now seemed petty and small. Samuel stepped closer to the table, laying out more reports, charts, and analyses. Each paper, each number, each corrected projection left no room for doubt. He had not only fixed the mistakes but had also suggested improvements that could increase profits, reduce losses, and make the company stronger than ever before. Mr. Carlyle's hands shook as he took one of the sheets. This is incredible. Every calculation, it's perfect. How did you do this?" Samuel paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I used what I know. I watched, I learned, and I prepared. Every detail, every trend, every mistake, I remembered. I knew that one day the right moment would come to show what could be done." The room was quiet, but the energy had changed. The executives no longer laughed. Their arrogance had melted into disbelief and respect. The man they had mocked, the janitor they had ignored, had revealed a brilliance they could not deny. One young executive, her voice trembling slightly, said, I don't understand. You've solved problems we've struggled with for months. You've fixed mistakes we didn't even know existed." Samuel nodded humbly. "I only did what was necessary. The company matters more than pride or titles. I wanted to help. And now, I can help more if you are willing to listen." The tension in the room shifted. The executives were no longer in control. The underdog, the quiet observer, had taken the first step toward leadership, not through power, not through shouting, but through intelligence, patience, and humility. Mr. Carlyle leaned back in his chair, swallowing hard. We never expected this. We judged you by your uniform, by your job, by how quiet you were. And we were wrong." Samuel's eyes softened. "It is easy to judge. People often see only what they expect. But intelligence and ability are not always visible on the surface. Sometimes, the quietest person in the room has the most to offer." The room was still, but a sense of awe had settled over the executives. Samuel had not just corrected mistakes, he had revealed a truth they could no longer ignore. A truth about human potential, about humility, and about the danger of underestimating someone. Miss Trenton looked at him, her eyes shining with a mix of admiration and regret. Samuel, you've taught us something important today. Not just about the company, but about people. About respect. Samuel simply nodded, a quiet satisfaction in his calm demeanor. He had not come for recognition or praise. He had come to show the truth, that knowledge, patience and observation could surpass arrogance and titles. A few executives, ashamed of their earlier behavior, whispered apologies. Some of them were still too stunned to speak. Samuel, however, remained humble. His mission was not to humiliate them but to guide them, to show them that one human, underestimated and overlooked, could make a difference that no title could ever achieve. As the meeting ended, the executives slowly began to understand the magnitude of what had happened. The janitor they had mocked had changed the entire room, the entire discussion, and perhaps even the direction of the company. They had underestimated him, and in doing so, they had learned the most valuable lesson. Never judge someone by appearances and never underestimate the power of one determined human being. Samuel collected his mop and bucket, moving toward the door. But even as he left, the impact of his revelation lingered. The executives whispered among themselves, realizing that their world had been quietly observed, analyzed and transformed. And somewhere in Samuel's calm expression, there was a spark, a promise that this was only the beginning. The full power of his insight, patience and strategy had yet to be revealed. The room had witnessed the first wave of astonishment, but the next moments would be even more dramatic, more transformative and more unforgettable. They have seen only the beginning, Samuel thought. The rest will leave them speechless. Little did they know, the quiet janitor they had laughed at had not only solved their problems but had also set the stage for a complete change in the company, and perhaps in their understanding of what one human being could truly achieve. The boardroom felt different that morning. The usual arrogance, the loud voices, the constant arguing, it was gone. In its place there was a quiet tension, an invisible electricity in the air. The executives, once confident and dismissive, now watched Samuel Harris with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. The man they had mocked as a simple janitor had shown them his genius, and they were beginning to realize that their world had shifted. Samuel pushed open the boardroom door, carrying his mop and bucket as usual. But today his presence was no longer invisible. Heads turned, eyes widened, and whispers filled the room. The executives, still unsure of how to react, paused their discussions and waited. "Good morning," Samuel said softly, his calm voice carrying authority without arrogance. "I have some suggestions that could help us move forward, more than just corrections. Real solutions, improvements that can change the company's future." Mr. Carlyle, still pale from the shock of the previous revelations, cleared his throat. "Go ahead, show us what you mean." Samuel smiled faintly and laid out the reports he had prepared over weeks of observation and analysis. This time it was not just about fixing mistakes, it was about creating strategies, predicting market trends and showing a clear path to success. Every chart, every number, every plan was precise, logical and undeniable. The executives leaned in, some skeptical, some amazed. Samuel walked them through each point, patiently explaining how small adjustments could lead to massive improvements. He spoke with clarity and authority, yet never with arrogance. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with their flustered confusion, and the room slowly shifted from doubt to respect. This is incredible," Miss Trenton said, her voice trembling slightly. "We never expected these insights. How did you figure all this out?" Samuel paused, looking around the room. "I have been observing, learning, and preparing. Every detail matters. I may be a janitor, but knowledge and insight are not limited by title. Anyone can see the truth if they take the time to notice it." The executives exchanged glances, their previous arrogance replaced with realization. They had been blind. They had judged him based on his appearance, his job, and his quiet nature, and now they were paying the price of their underestimation. Samuel continued, showing how their current strategies were flawed, how resources had been wasted, and how small errors could have led to massive losses. He also highlighted opportunities that had been overlooked, opportunities that could bring growth and stability to the company. One by one the executives began to understand. Their eyes widened as they followed Samuel's logic. Their voices, once confident and dismissive, became tentative. They asked questions, listened carefully, and even took notes. Samuel had not only corrected their mistakes, he had guided them toward a better future. Mr. Carlyle, the man who had mocked him the most, finally spoke, his voice quiet and filled with awe. "Samuel, I don't know what to say. You've changed everything. How did we not see this before?" Samuel smiled gently. "You didn't see it because you didn't look. You judged by appearances, by titles, by habits. But knowledge, patience, and careful observation matter more than ego. The boardroom was silent, but the energy had shifted completely. Samuel had turned the tables. The executives who had mocked him, ignored him, and underestimated him were now dependent on his insight. For the first time, they realized that one humble, overlooked person could hold the key to the success of the entire company. A young executive, still shaking, whispered, He's amazing. I can't believe we doubted him." Samuel nodded. "Doubt is easy. Seeing the truth takes patience." By the end of the meeting, the executives had accepted Samuel's guidance. They acknowledged his insights, apologized for underestimating him, and began to trust his judgment. Samuel had not shouted, demanded, or forced his way in. He had quietly, patiently, and intelligently earned their respect and authority. As he collected his mop and bucket to leave, he paused and looked around the room. The executives were already discussing his recommendations, planning their next steps, and following his strategies without question. Samuel's subtle influence had taken root, and the company was already beginning to shift under his guidance. "This is only the beginning," Samuel thought quietly. "They have seen a glimpse of what is possible. Soon they will realize the full power of what one human can achieve." Outside the boardroom, Samuel moved down the hallway as if nothing had happened. To anyone else he was just the humble janitor quietly doing his job. But inside, he carried the satisfaction of someone who had quietly changed the course of events, proving that intelligence, patience, and humility could triumph over arrogance and titles. For the executives, the lesson was clear. Never underestimate anyone, for even the quietest person in the room can turn the tables, reshape the future, and leave a mark that cannot be ignored. And in that moment, the story of Samuel Harris, the janitor who had shocked an entire boardroom, entered a new chapter. The underdog had won not through force or pride, but through patience, insight, and the quiet power of human potential. The boardroom was quiet, but the energy in the air had changed completely. The arrogance, the laughter, the petty arguments, they were gone. In their place was respect, admiration, and an unspoken understanding. The executives who had once mocked Samuel Harris were now listening carefully, taking notes and following his guidance. The humble janitor had done what no one expected. He had reshaped their perspective and earned their trust. Samuel stood quietly near the corner, mop and bucket resting against the wall. He watched the executives discuss plans, corrections, and improvements with a seriousness that had never been there before. He did not need to speak. The work he had done, the insights he had shared, and the patience he had shown had spoken louder than any words ever could. Mr. Carlyle, who had been the loudest skeptic, finally cleared his throat. "Samuel, I have to admit we were wrong. All of us. We judged you by your uniform, by your job, by how quiet you are. And now we see the truth. You have taught us something we will never forget." Samuel smiled softly, his calm eyes meeting Mr. Carlyle's. Titles and appearances can deceive. But observation, patience, and a willingness to understand can reveal the truth. "I only did what was necessary for the company. Nothing more." The executives nodded, some with humility, some still in awe. They realized that Samuel's value was not just in correcting their mistakes or improving the company, it was in showing them that underestimating someone could be their greatest weakness. A young executive whispered to a colleague, "I never thought a janitor could do what he just did. It changes everything." Samuel quietly moved around the boardroom, straightening papers, adjusting a chair here, a pen there. To anyone else it seemed like ordinary janitor work. But for the executives, every movement reminded them of the man's quiet strength, his diligence, and his intelligence. He had never demanded attention, yet he commanded respect through action. Miss Trenton, her voice soft but sincere, said, "Samuel, thank you. You've not only corrected mistakes and improved our work, you've taught us a lesson about respect, humility, and seeing the potential in people we often overlook." Samuel simply nodded. Praise was not what he sought. He had come to show them what one human could do when underestimated and ignored, when patience and insight were combined. He had come to prove that even the quietest, most overlooked individuals could have the greatest impact. As the day went on, the executives began implementing Samuel's suggestions. Strategies were corrected, mistakes were fixed, and new opportunities were explored. The company began to shift subtly but significantly, all because one man had quietly observed, prepared, and acted at the right time. Later, after the meeting, Samuel walked through the empty hallway, mop in hand. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows on the polished floor. He paused for a moment and looked back at the boardroom. Inside he could hear faint discussions, plans being made, mistakes being corrected, perspectives changing. A quiet satisfaction filled him. He had done more than clean floors that day. He had changed minds, hearts, and the future of the company. And yet, Samuel remained humble. He did not need recognition or praise. His satisfaction came from knowing that he had made a difference. From knowing that one human, underestimated and overlooked, could rise and leave a mark that no one would forget. The executives, meanwhile, were still processing the events of the past days. Some whispered apologies for their earlier mockery. Others marveled at Samuel's insight. All of them had learned a lesson. Never judge a person by their appearance or their job, for true value often lies hidden, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As Samuel exited the building that evening, the city lights reflected on the glass walls. People walked past him, unaware of the quiet hero who had changed an entire boardroom, an entire company, and perhaps even their perspective on life. He blended into the crowd, invisible yet extraordinary, humble yet powerful. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. One act of observation, patience, and insight could ripple outward, affecting more than just a company. It could inspire others, change lives, and remind everyone that underestimation is humanity's greatest mistake, and patience, wisdom, and humility are its greatest strengths. Never underestimate anyone, Samuel whispered to himself. Even the quietest person in the room can change the world. With that, Samuel walked into the night, a humble janitor by appearance, but a force of intelligence, patience, and human potential in reality. And the story of the janitor who shocked an entire boardroom would live on, inspiring anyone who doubted the quiet strength of those who work unseen, who observe silently, and who wait for the right moment to show the world what they are truly capable of.